Hello, so welcome back to my channel. Welcome everyone. So thank you so much for subscribing, for sharing your likes, your comments. Thank you so much for that. So for today's I'll be sharing another video lesson. So number 2 in this subject. So today's I'll be sharing to you a very quick discussion, about Philippine history, spaces for conflict and controversy. So in this chapter, we will get to know the problems in Philippine history. In chapters, we will get to know some of the important aspect in Philippine history, uh, in trying to understand how to process historical inquiry. So there are two concepts that need to be defined before we can come up with our historical analysis of problems in history. So these are interpretation and multi-perspectivity. So you talk about interpretation, so we will try to understand how to interpret history. When you talk about multi-perspectivity, is we will try to embrace the different views, the different perspective when you talk about history. So let's get to know this topic, making sense of the past, historical interpretation. So as you all know, we in our lesson number 1, we talk about history is the study of the past. So, and historiography is trying to understand or comprehending the past. So, Geoffrey Barraclough defines history as an attempt to discover, on the basis of fragmentary evidence, the significant things about the past. So, history is the study of the past, and there's this one person who study about trying to discover a lot of things when you talk about history in the name of Geoffrey Barraclough. And he also notes the history we read, though based on facts, is strictly speaking sometimes not factual at all, but it is a series of accepted judgment. So again, there's a lot of questions when you talk about history, the authenticity, the clarity. So sometimes always subjective. So it depends on the historian on how he interprets the things that are happening. So, but still, it is based on facts. Although it's not that factual and absolute, but still, history is a series of accepted judgments. So we all accept that document, we all accept the happenings of the past. So such judgment of historians on how the past should be seen make the foundation of historical interpretation. So your judgment, so if I am an historian, my judgment on how the past should be seen, it makes the foundation of historical interpretation. So it depends on the historian on how we interpret the things that are happening in the past. So my judgment is my actual foundation of how I interpret things. It depends on my judgment. So again, historians collect data from the primary sources. Primary is you are the original author. It is written on the actual date and time. So historians gather those facts and then draw their own reading so that people can understand, people will get to know the historical event and make sense of the past. So it is the history is a series of accepted judgment for everyone. So the premise is that not all primary sources are accessible to a general audience. Yes, that's the problem. So primary, we need to gather sources from the. We need to gather facts. We need to gather a lot of facts collected from primary sources. But the problem is, not all primary sources are accessible to a general audience. So it is impossible for us to access. It is not accessible to public, to mass, to a general audience. So without the proper training and background, a non-historian interpreting a primary source may do more harm than good. So a primary source may even cause misunderstanding, sometimes even resulting in more problems. So that's the downside, no? We need to gather facts. We need to gather facts from primary sources, but unfortunately, not all primary sources are accessible. So, accessible to general audience. So, without a proper training and background, if I am the historian, my interpretation may cause more harm than good. So, it may even cause more misunderstanding, sometimes even resulting in more problems. So, that's the problem. So, how to gather good historical interpretation? So there's a downside. So it is not acceptable. Primary sources are not accessible to a general audience. So again, interpretations of the past, therefore, vary according to who reads the primary source, when it was read, and how it was read. Yes, so if you are a historian, you need to be careful doing some historical interpretation. So it depends on it vary according to who reads the primary source, when it was read, and how it was read. So it really depends on the historian. That's why history also experiences a lot of problems, difficulties in trying to come up with a strong historical truth. So as a student of history, as a student of history, we must be well equipped to recognize different types of interpretations. So we need to come up with a strong foundation on how to recognize different types of interpretation. So why this may differ from each other and how interpretation of historical events change over time. Thus, it is an important skill for a student of history to track these changes in an attempt to understand the past. So as a student of history, so we need to be well equipped on how to identify different types of interpretations. And many of the things we accept as true about the past may not be the case anymore. Just because these were taught to us as facts when we were younger does not mean it is set in stone. History is, after all, a construct. So, as what they say, there are things that are being taught to us when we were just young. So, not everything that is being taught to us is true. So, it might be changed because history is continuously changing and it is not fixed. It is not absolute. It is changing. It is a construct. It is a human construct. And again, when you talk about interpretation, it depends on the historian and how he reads the primary source, how he interprets the source, and how he gathered the facts. So, and as a construct, it is open for interpretation. So since history is a construct, it is open for interpretation. So we are capable to interpret that. We have our own interpretation, we have our own analysis on what's happening down there. We also have our own understanding about the facts. So it is a human construct. It is open for interpretation. It is open for everyone. So there might be conflicting and competing accounts of the past that needs one's attention and can impact the way we view our country's history and identity. Therefore, to subject to evaluation not only the primary source but also the historical interpretation of the same to ensure that the current interpretation is reliable to support our acceptance of events of the past. So when trying to get a good historical interpretation, you need to conduct a thorough evaluation to the primary source that you are gathering. You should also look at the historical interpretation, the current interpretation, so to check the consistency, if it is consistent, reliable, and valid to support our acceptance of events of the past. So again, although history is subjective, but it is also scientific because it needs a lot of extreme research and extreme methodology to come up with a good historical truth. So it is a series of accepted judgment. That's according to Geoffrey Barraclough. So that's the main idea of history. Sometimes we are so confused on what to believe on because again, history after all is a construct. It is open for interpretation. But as long as you conducted a thorough evaluation, you also check the primary source if it is valid, the historical interpretation of the same, the current interpretation is reliable, just to support our acceptance of events of the past. So understanding the past history is the same as conducting research. When you conduct research, you need to gather a lot of information about it and trying to check if the document is consistent or reliable and valid. So it's just the same case with conducting history or trying to understand the historiographical problems in history. So another concept that we need to understand about the conflict and the controversies is the idea of multiperspectivity. So with different views, different understanding, different analysis, different interpretation. So with several possibilities of interpreting the past, another important concept that we must note is multiperspectivity. This can be defined as a way of looking at historical events, personalities, developments, cultures, and societies from different perspectives. So, if you're trying to understand history, if you are an historian, you need to come up with trying to look at the historical event, the people, the development, the culture, the personalities, and the societal function from different perspectives. Not only just your own perspective, you also need to deal with others' perspective. This means that there is a multitude of ways by which we can view the world, and each could be equally valid at the same time, equally partial as well. So again, we need to understand that there is a multitude of ways by which we can view the world. Yes, I can view the world in my own perspective. You can also view your world in your own perspective. So we have different views on how we can view the world. And part of it is true, and part of it is not true. So historical writing is by definition, they consider it biased, partial, and contains preconception. Again, because of its subjectivity, because of its a lot of things to consider. Sometimes historical writings is by definition considered as being biased, partial, and contains preconceptions. So the historians decide what sources to use. Yes, if I am a researcher, if I am a historian, I need to decide what sources to use, what interpretation to make more apparent, depending on what his end is. So it depends to me. I will choose what is the best for me, what is good for me, what is the best interpretation about this. And again, historians may misinterpret evidence. So even historians, students can also do some misinterpretation about a certain evidence, attending to those who suggest that a certain event happened and then ignore the rest against the evidence. So there is a possibility that we are we misinterpret things, and sometimes we ignore the other things and we accept what is acceptable to us. So historians may omit significant facts about their subject, which makes the interpretation unbalanced. So sometimes as an historian, as a student, as a teacher, as an interpreter, historians may have the freedom to omit significant facts about their subject, which can lead the interpretation unbalanced. So sometimes because of our tendency to delete some information, so it makes the interpretation unbalanced. It's not acceptable to everyone. So historians may impose a certain ideology to the subject. Yes, they can do it. They can impose a certain ideas, a certain concept, a certain context. It depends on the historian, which may not be appropriate to the period the subject was from. So there is a possibility that the historians may impose a certain concept, a certain ideology, which may not be appropriate to. And also, historians may also provide a single cause for an event without considering other possible the cause and effect explanations of the said event. Okay? So again, there's a downside. Historian may impose his own ideology or concept, which is not appropriate for the subject. Number two is historians may also provide a single cause of an event without considering a lot of possible possible effects of the said event. So So these are just many ways on a historian may fail in his historical inference, description, and interpretation. So these are just many ways that the historian may fail to come up with a good historical inference, description, and interpretation. So with multi-perspectivity as an approach in history, we must understand that historical interpretations contains discrepancies, contradictions, ambiguities, and are often the focus of dissent. So it is natural because we are living in a different views on how we view the world. So it is understandable that when we use the idea of multi-perspectivity, we must understand that historical interpretations contain discrepancies, contradictions, ambiguities, and are often the focus of dissent. So exploring multiple perspective in history requires incorporating source materials that reflect different views of an event in history because, again, singular historical narratives do not provide space to inquire and investigate. Yeah, so it would be better if you are a student of history studying the past to incorporate a lot of source materials to reflect the different views, because the more source of materials, the more you are capable to gather a lot of sources that can support your primary source. Because again, a singular historical narratives do not provide space for to inquire and investigate, but different sources that counter each other may create space for more investigations and research. So again, a good research mo na siya ang daghang interested to conduct more research. But a single historical narrative do not provide more research, do not provide space to conduct more research, more investigation. So that's the good thing when we use the idea of multi-perspectivity. We gather a lot of facts, we gather a lot of different views, and in order for us to come up with a more wider scope, more space for more investigations and research, while providing more evidences for those truths that the sources agree on. So different kinds of sources also provide different historical truth. Okay, so again, when you are conducting research, gather a lot of informations, gather a lot of facts, different views, so that it can also support your idea. So different kinds of sources. So again, different kinds of sources also provide historical truth. It would be better if you're an historian, a student, a researcher to gather different kinds of sources to create more space for more investigations and more research. So then it is a bit tedious no, when you do research, when you are a historian, because you need to come up with a multi-perspectivity, different views, different things, so different sources. The more you gather different sources, the more you research will become valid to the idea of historical. It provides for the audience more complex but also more complete and richer understanding of the past. So gathering a lot of information, gathering a lot of different sources can also create a more complex, a more complicated kind of study research. But again, it also gives you a more complete and a richer understanding of the past. So that's the idea why we conduct research. Understanding the past is also the same idea with conducting research. So you are trying to gather facts, and you also try to get different sources of the facts to make your research more valid, more reliable, and more complete, and can also provide a more richer understanding of the past. So that's there is an issue, there is conflict, there is complexity when you talk about understanding the past and trying to come up with a good interpretation. But then again, the main idea here is, as a student, as a researcher, as an historian, is gathering a lot of different sources is a good thing. Trying to understand what was going on by gathering a lot of multi-perspective, different sources, different views, can create a bigger space for more investigation and more research, and that makes your history a more scientific and more valid and reliable up to this day. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you are getting a lot of learning lessons from this very quick video. I hope that you learned a lot. I hope that I am helping you learn about some conflict in history, controversies, questions, doubts. So I hope that I was able to help you. And this is our lesson 2 for the subject readings in Philippine history. So thank you so much. If you want me to explain something, just drop your comments below as much as possible. I'll do it for you. Thank you so much for your likes, for your shares, and for subscribing. Thank you and God bless you.